Hi everyone! Today we're going to be exploring layered existentialism, both the framework as well as the application. If you're new here, welcome. If you're not new here, thank you so much again for your time to honestly share it with me. To get us started, what is layered existentialism? Layered existentialism is a framework for exploring the human being as a dynamical system operating through autopilot, biology and the nervous system self, meaning making and narration, as well as coherence preservation, especially under existential pressure or struggle or whatever kind of way you would like to define that. So this here, I know it looks like it's super linear. It's not supposed to be linear. Like the arrows can literally go any which way on these layers. But I figured for this presentation or explanation that this format might be the easiest. So this is called the 4 layers of self. Layer 1 is the autopilot layer. And we live our day-to-day in layer 1, right? Again, like we can live in multiple layers simultaneously, but a lot of the times we live on autopilot. So you can think of things such as routine. These are the surface level things, the habits that we have. And one of the things I wanted to mention was that this helps us form patterns. This helps us form patterns. The next layer is layer 2, which is the biology and the nervous system self. The best way that I could explain layer 2 is just think of your physical form, right? Your body. And all that it encompasses. So the purpose of layer 2 is to keep the human organism alive. So just keeping yourself alive, keeping whomever alive, and that's the purpose of layer 2, is to keeping the body alive. Okay, and I don't like to speak in absolutes, and so perhaps I might be stretching this, but the foundation of most, if not all, human organisms is that we want to belong. So a sense of belonging, safety, love and acceptance always comes up to my mind, right? We want to be accepted and loved for who we are as a person. But this is kind of the foundation to, a lot of the things within the biology and the nervous system. I'm trying to think if there's any more. Probably connection is the other one. But I would also say connection is probably part of belonging as well. The next layer is layer 3, which is the narrative and the meaning making. This layer exists because one of the things that I have observed about humans, and perhaps in my opinion, I think a lot of people also would agree, is that we like a good story, right? Because there's something about a good story that brings the sensation in our body, and those that create those stories are so masterful at it, or it resonates with us, and to me, it makes us incredibly human when that happens. But to go a little bit further in depth, what does narrative and meaning making mean? Narrative and meaning making is that we assign meaning to the sensation that gets created by our body. So, for example, if I'm trying to think of an example. So, if a sensation that was produced in my body, let's say a croissant. I don't know why that's the first thing I thought about. If I had a really good croissant, I would be like, I want to come back to this place, right? That's so that's far from what I mentioned earlier about story and like telling a good story, but I still created a meaning and assigned it to this. Right? I think a lot of times, people might wonder what the meaning of their life is, and whether life is truly meaningful or it's meaningless, or if meaning is assigned, etc., etc. In this specific framework, and I'm actually going to share a little backstory about how this framework came to be. It's called Layered Existentialism because this framework and this entire concept started when I started researching into philosophy, specifically existential philosophy, and this is why this is called Layered Existentialism. So you can perhaps think of this as more of traditional existentialism enhanced with modern science and modern research by just so many amazing human beings. They've dedicated so much time and their energy to make progress on knowledge, which is amazing. And this is how it is thus far. But with narrative and meaning making, again, mentioned earlier, we put meaning and description to what the sensation that gets provided in our body. And then this is why in layered existentialism, it is believed that meaning is created with a twist of psychology. And then the last layer is layer 4, which is coherence preservation. Coherence preservation, I would say right now is the most philosophical lens. Because coherence preservation, philosophical in a sense, let me try to massage the words out of my brain here. The point of coherence preservation is that there are a lot of times in a person's life, if they've lived long enough, that it might get destabilized, right? I think a lot of the times what some of those universal destabilization might look like, unless it is very culturally grounded or it's very traditionally grounded with whatever ritual that they might have, is, for example, grief and death. If we've lived long enough, we might experience the sensations of going through grief when someone dies, especially someone that we care about, right? Or even grief for situations and circumstances. And coherence preservation, one of the things it's doing is trying to tie the entire human organism together and to provide continuity. The point of it is to protect. I guess I should also mention that there are 3 subcategories for it so far. The first one is rigid coherence. Ouch. The second one is adaptive coherence. And the third one is collapse coherence. I wanted to add a little bit more precision to this because, what does destabilization look like? What does coherence look like? So rigid coherence means that they have really compressed continuity and everything like that together. And with that, they reduce ambiguity, right? So they resist uncertainty, and then they become more and more clinging on to the certainty that they believe to be true, right? Because the less predictable that something is, the more that they might feel threatened. Again, this is about survival. And when someone has rigid coherence, they might have a more, they might protect their identity in a more rigid stance. The next one is adaptive coherence. Adaptive coherence is that they're a little bit more open to ambiguity. They are still maintaining continuity of themselves as a person, in addition to listening to new ideas that might challenge how they believe the world and reality to be true. And with that, they can continuously update themselves based off of, what it is, what kind of information gets brought into them. And then the next one is collapse coherence. So collapse coherence is that they cannot maintain enough continuity. So this is where they start losing their identity. They start, they begin to feel disorganized. They might start to fragment. And speaking of fragmentation, this is actually, with collapse, this is where someone can fragment. So with this, they can feel very internally scattered. And as you can imagine, if there's nothing to grab onto, that's pretty tough to live. That's pretty hard to live. And and I want to explore the idea whether this is where someone might go into religion or might go into philosophy. And so this is just a little bit about layer 4. So, speaking about application. The application, one of the things that I wanted to mention, as I've mentioned earlier, is like, how do you use this? So earlier I mentioned like being on your phone and not getting a text back from someone that you really care about and you thought that they were going to text you immediately. So what happens is that, I hope you can hear my dogs. They're going to be my sidekicks in the show. So what does application look like? For that specific phone scenario, this is what happens in layer 1. We check our phones constantly. Because this is the thing that we don't think about, right? We're just constantly pulling up our phone. We're checking it. We're perhaps going through their social media page and see if they're doing something or if there's something else that we're missing. The next thing is the biology, right? So from application, this is layer 1 to layer 2. This is the biology. So what happens? Our body will react before we even get any sort of conclusion, right? We haven't created a narrative yet. The body works just that fast because we would feel the sensations of things like your chest that would get tight, or that you would, your stomach feels like it has dropped. Maybe you start feeling like you're having some restlessness or like shallow breathing. If you can identify some of these symptoms, it's almost in line with anxiety, right? And the point of anxiety is it's a call for alarm to the body. That's what anxiety does, right? It's like, oh, shoot, we might be in danger. Like, let's put everything, like, let's pump it as fast as possible and go from there. But in modern day, not receiving a text message for whatever reason is today's modern day for that kind of sensation. And then from here, let me write down sensations. And then from here, we create a narrative, we create a meaning. We would say something probably, what are some examples? Did I say something wrong? Did I do something wrong? Are they mad at me? Or maybe they just don't care about me. And again, this is someone that you care about. This isn't like some telemarketer or spam that has your phone number for whatever reason. And this is where the meaning that we created gets assigned to the sensations of the body. So again, it's like, and then lastly, coherence preservation is, like, I just need to stop caring. Because, right, this is a defense mechanism. This is a coping mechanism. I'm not texting them again. Maybe it's just me. And then they might say things such as like, this doesn't matter anymore. So again, this is coherence preservation. There's a lot of ways that we can go upon this. But one of the things with coherence preservation is that perhaps we can put ourselves at a distance enough saying like, hey, I'm going into my autopilot again. I'm going through my patterns. And to identify and to break that from where it might start. The other thing, as I've mentioned earlier, is that as you're going through having those sensations in your body, if the person has experienced the sensation before, especially when it gets heightened, because there is oftentimes a loop between layer 2 and layer 3, right? We create this narrative, and then it makes us feel worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, right? And then we just feed to the fire of the sensations. But if we're able to distance ourselves enough, we can be like, hey, I'm recognizing these patterns that I do, right? Perhaps they really are just busy. It's not a big deal. We could get up, go for a walk. We can get up, run, because one of the things is if the body is working through so much of the blood and everything, your heart rate is increasing, the blood is flowing, staying still is gonna not be the best option, but moving the body, right? Either it's jumping up and down, doing some push-ups, running in place, whatever that might be. And then that's one of the ways that we can break the cycle and break the habit. But with that being said, thank you so much for your time. Please feel free to email me.